thank you for being here and welcome. Let me introduce myself and our esteemed panel. I'm Judith Richards. I'm the creator of the Richards Trauma Process. And joining me this evening are some of the practitioners who've been through the TRTP Practitioner training program. And I've purposely chosen people who, like Richard, for example, who just he did the February-March training, so he's a newbie. Kim Hobson, who's done it a long time ago, Kim.
Yes.
What was it, 2015? 2016.
Yeah.
And Helen,
February.
when did...
4 years ago in March.
Okay, so 2016.
17.
2017? Yeah, well, anyway, let me introduce you, first of all, to Richard Fay. Richard, over to you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your own good self?
Psychotherapist in private practice in Brisbane, Australia. We're all in Australia. Been practicing for 10 years. This is my fourth career change, but the last year has been quite wonderful for me. Trained in February, as Judith said, and I see pretty much everyone. Also led a not-for-profit charity called the Centre for Men and Families, which helps men work through crises for the last 7 years.
Yeah, and that has so many members. How many, Richard?
So it's about 1,200 men around Australia who are connected with our work at the moment, but many more that have over the time connected with us. It's
great stuff that you do. Thank you for that, Richard. And Richard is in Brisbane, Australia. We have some people here from the States. I think Jennifer is from Oregon. There's somebody else here from the States. Kim.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Hobson. I'm in Sydney and I'm a psychologist. And as Jude said, I've been practicing TRTP now since I did the training in February in 2016. I've been in private practice for over 30 years now, and I've got a background in working as a counsellor and psychologist in community mental health, as a counsellor at one of the universities, and I've also got a background in teaching. And I've been doing TRTP since 2016 and very, very happy with it. Thank you, Jude.
Thanks, Kim. And Dr. Helen Mercer in Melbourne.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm from Melbourne. I'm a clinical psychologist. Like the others, I've had a few careers too. I was a teacher. My first love, I guess, was sport. So I was a phys ed teacher, and then I did that as a profession in another world. And you were a Royal Tennis champion, yeah. US Open winner, Australian Open winner on a number of occasions. Just saying. And then went to psychology, and everyone assumed I was going to be a sports psychologist working with elite athletes. It's like, no, enough of that. And so I've been practicing as a psychologist for about 23 years, I think, private practice, and did TRTP about 4 years ago, and yeah, completely changed my world, revamped myself as a practitioner. I've got another 20 years ahead of me, I think, maybe 30.
Good on you, Helen. So thank you, Helen and Richard and Kim, for joining us. And we're going to invite you, our attendees, to type in any question that you would like to throw at these good people. It can be anything that you like. I will start it off by asking some questions that have already been sent in, and thank you, Jess Mannion and others, for sending in questions. So feel free, people. This is a time for you to ask questions of the panel. But I'll ask one that a lot of people have been asking. Were you skeptical when you heard about TRTP? Who would like to go first?
I'll start.
You start, Helen. Dr. Helen Mercer.
No, I wasn't, because I guess coming from the place of Medicare, seems to think that in 10 sessions you can use CBT to help people to manage anxiety and depression, and Bob's your uncle, off you go, have a good life. So if you're meant to be able to do that in 10 sessions, then why can't the TRTP, which is designed to work in 6 to sort of 8-10 hours of work, why can't that equally be as effective? So some people sort of think, oh, 3-4 double sessions, how could that possibly happen? It's like, because it's effective. And so from my perspective, I thought there's something missing here. That the long term, I was known for my long term, passionate,
very long term,
patient sort of thing, and it would get results on paper, but there was always something missing. There's something missing, and so I was looking for that missing link, and to me, that's what TRTP brought, that missing link.
Okay, thank you, Helen. And what Helen says there, double sessions. So when we say 3 sessions, they're usually about an hour and a half, up to 2 hours. And yes, they can be broken into the clinical hour, the therapeutic hour. So session 1 would be half of it done on a Monday, the next half on the Tuesday. So you can break it up. But yes, they are longer sessions. Richard, were you skeptical?
Yeah, I think the better word would have been angry. Peer supervision with one of the mentors of the program. He wasn't a mentor back then. He was just my peer supervision group, and he started talking about client outcomes that were too good to believe. And he was hijacking our supervision group, which had been meeting together for many years, to talk about client challenges and problems. And we'd brainstorm, as you do in supervision, and talk about possible interventions and possible conceptualizations. And here he was talking about client breakthroughs, and I wasn't happy at all. And I took it to my supervisor, and I said, I don't think that's fair that he should be talking about such wonderful outcomes. Nothing's that good. And I don't believe him. And I also, I think, had some professional jealousy, which is simply saying I wanted better outcomes for my own clients. Not that I was getting bad ones, I just wanted better ones, much better ones. And so, yeah, there was a sense of skepticism, because the industry doesn't talk about successes. They keep them, when they do, it's normally they write a book or they go on a speaking tour. There just weren't many successes, real successes talked about. And suddenly here was this approach which had amazing outcomes. And I was at first angry and then eventually curious.
Thank you very much, Richard. And Libby, I see you've got your hand up, but if you could just, instead of putting your hand up, could you type in a question? So just, Kim, were you, let's finish off the answers to this question. Were you skeptical when you heard about TRTP?
Somewhat. I hadn't had any first-hand experience of colleagues who were talking about it. So the first I'd heard was when I was getting information about it. I think the thing I was more skeptical about or wondering about was, is this something that I could do? So when someone creates a process, it may be very particular to that person. They have been the creator, they're going to be able to do it, but will that translate to other people? So I remember in our conversations, that's well and true, that's good, Judith, but can I do that? Is it going to be transferable? Are other people going to be able to practice this? And you were very clear and saying that indeed, yes. And still it took me about a year before I really came on board. I was investigating other ways to deal with trauma. Like Helen, I've been working in medium long-term psychotherapy. And I had also become very disillusioned with that way of working, and certainly CBT wasn't the way to go, particularly when working with traumatised people. And even though you might have reasonable outcomes after 3-5+ years of working with trauma, it just didn't seem good enough. So in the end, I just became more curious, and my curiosity and my desire for a whole lot of reasons to try something different is what eventually led me to do the process. And I've been, really delighted with the outcomes ever since.
Thanks, Kim, for
Yes.
that. Jason, you've got your hand up. If you could just type in your question rather than putting your hand up, everybody, that would be really, really helpful. We've got some questions coming through here.
Explaining TRTP.
Yeah, I will go into that. Someone said, does TRTP suit online sessions? Example, Zoom. Yes. Actually, when I'm seeing clients, which I'm not doing at the moment, I prefer Zoom because I have a headset on. My client has a headset on, and it's very close work, very intimate work, and I can get right in their head. So we've all found that you have just as good results online as face-to-face, which is very helpful in these COVID times, but it also means you're no longer geographically constrained. So I think my furthest away client was Azerbaijan, because, you know, you might see someone locally and they have family, they have friends all around the world, and so it goes. A couple of people are saying, can we do a description of TRTP? I will do a very nutshell version. This webinar is not actually here to describe TRTP, but for those who may have a bit more experience and exposure to TRTP, it's more about the training. However, just very quickly, I will just explain TRTP. TRTP is a 3-session, sometimes 4-session process. And yes, they are longer sessions, 1.5 hours to 2 hours. They can be broken into the therapeutic hour. But how it works, and I'm just going to do a very rough infographic because I haven't prepared to do this, but I will just share the whiteboard and just explain in a nutshell what TRTP does. So just 1 second while I get organized here. So I will draw in black. Okay, so just roughly, here's the graph for those who haven't seen it. Here's the model, my model upon which TRTP is created. What happens with a normal person if such a being exists? They go along, they have a distressing event, they release distress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. The event passes, and this is important. Without doing anything, the body brings itself back down to calm. You don't have to go on a 3-week yoga retreat or go and sit on a mountain. It just, the body regulates. We have a life-threatening event. We come up here to fight, flight, freeze. The event passes, and once again, there's this regulation that is self-regulation that kicks in. And that's the story of someone with a regulated normal system. What happens, however, is some people get stuck up here. After the event, they never come down. The body has lost the ability to regulate itself. Homeostasis just doesn't happen. So the person stays up here in this hyper-aroused state, re-triggering consistently, triggering fight, flight, freeze all the time. The whole being is screaming, I'm not safe. So the person is either stuck in the hyper-aroused state of fight and flight or in the freeze state of depression. So what do we have to do? The great trauma specialists, the trauma experts, Van der Kolk, Levine, etc., said in order to bring somebody from, just a second here, from I'm not safe to it's over and I'm safe now, which is absolutely possible. It's over. Levine, Van der Kolk talk about the need to get somebody from here, I'm not safe, down to here, it's over. They say that 2 things have to happen in order to resolve trauma. 1, the person has to be moved to an empowered position in regard to what happened, and 2, the body has to know it's over. Well, I go further and say not only does the body have to know it's over, but, sorry, I'll just, but also, and I've just a second, and I'm safe now. So not only does the body have to know it's over, but the body and the subconscious has to know it's over, and I'm safe now, because the subconscious runs the body. It runs every chemical reaction, every electrical response in the body. It's run by the subconscious. So, you know, there's lots of talk about the body, you know, the body keeps the score, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens actually, and I'll just clear this and make another drawing, if you can bear with me. What happens is we have, say, a child has a distressing event. Let's take away the word trauma and say distressing event, because when we think trauma, most people think war or Black Saturday bushfires. But when if we just say distressing event, we'll get a better understanding what we're talking about. So they have a distressing event. Of course, they release the amygdala fires, emergency services in the brain, adrenaline and cortisol is released. It flows through the body. The systems that are not required to flee a tiger are shut down, so that all the energy goes to our limbs and so that we can fight or flee. So what gets shut down? The gut gets shut down. You don't have to digest breakfast when you're running from a tiger. That's why there's so many gut problems with trauma. The frontal lobe gets shut down because you don't have to do higher maths when running from a tiger. Part of the brain shutdown includes the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is responsible for memory. And when it gets shut down, it doesn't do its job. Its normal job is to, at the end of the event, once it's over, is to put that event in the right filing cabinet in the warehouse of memory and shut the door and walk away. That's over. But instead, what happens is that event is never brought to an end, and instead of being stored in long-term memory, it's stored in the subconscious. It's happening now. So we have these big events and small events, and we get these videotape loops running in the subconscious as if that event is happening now. My mother's locked me out of the house now. My father's hitting me now. The teacher is humiliating me in front of the classroom now. And so what happens is the distress builds up like the pressure in a balloon. And at some point, and it can be just the straw that breaks the camel's back, or it can be a horrendous catastrophic event, but we can blow out. So this balloon of all these videotape loops blows out, and we go into anxiety, depression, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, or some other more serious disease state. So my premise is that the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, etc., is not the issue. The issue is that the being is screaming, I'm not safe. Why? Because of the dreadful things that have happened in the past that have not been stored in the warehouse of memory and the door shut. They've not been brought to an end. That's over. Instead, this is happening now. When I was 6, when I was 10, when I was 12, all these events are happening. My body is responding. I am responding as if those are happening now. Consciously, I'm not aware of it unless it's PTSD, in which case, if I have extreme PTSD, those subconscious videotape loops will break through into the conscious mind in the form of flashbacks, relived experiences. So the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, et cetera, are simply symptoms of these videotape loops playing all the time. The symptoms of I'm not safe. Why? Because of the dreadfulness that has happened in the past. I'm reliving it in my subconscious like a videotape loop. It's happening now. So all we have to do in order to get rid of the symptom is turn off the top 3 or 4 most distressing events. These tape loops, we turn off these videotape loops, and the person is returned from I'm not safe, stuck in that hyper-aroused state of fight and flight, or the freeze state of depression. The person is returned to it's over and I'm safe now. And the whole being returns to calm, and self-regulation kicks in again. So of course there will be distressing events in the future, but what will happen is the whole system will just recalibrate, and the person, without consciously trying to, the whole system will return to calm. So that's what TRTP does. So that in a nutshell is how TRTP works. How does it do that? It talks to the subconscious in the language of the subconscious, which is the imagination. So we step our clients through particular scenarios which they richly imagine, and the body and the subconscious believe what we richly imagine. If we imagine sucking on a big wedge of juicy, really sour lemon, we'll get the saliva response. Our body will respond just as if that's actually happening. You can, if you want more information on this, you can go to the TRTP, the Richard's Trauma Process channel on YouTube. There are videos there where I go into great depth explaining what TRTP does. So TRTP, the Richard's Trauma Process channel on YouTube. Do yourself a favor and go and have a look if you want some more information. Okay, so getting back to these questions. So we've explained the description of chat. Does TRTP suit online sessions? Yes, it does. Is there a particular client type that, and how can TRTP? Okay, let's do some general questions first. Jess Mannion sent in a question earlier. How does TRTP differ from other trauma training such as somatic experiencing, attachment-based therapy, ACT, or does it contain elements of these? Would anyone like to address that question in whole or in part? How does TRTP differ? Perhaps we could go to the outcomes.
Well,
Go on, Kim.
Richard.
No, you go.
TRTP is a very a practice that may draw on some of those, but it doesn't combine those. It's very a process that works very differently, and the outcomes are so different to I trained in EMDR, but I never really practiced it because it didn't suit me. ACT, somatic therapies, I did some training in somatic therapies. I found that TRTP is a lot more efficient and effective and goes straight to the trauma straight away. So we're easily able to identify the trauma, where it sits, how it's impacted the person, and work at that level immediately so that the client will actually experience a release straight away, almost immediately. And some clients, after the first session, they're already experiencing such a significant change. By the second session, greater change even still, and so on. Whereas my experience with these other therapies, it isn't as dramatic, I suppose, as TRTP can be. And having said that, not every client has dramatic responses, but many do.
Yeah. Yeah, I get asked these questions all the time. Is it like EMDR? Is it like CBT? Is it like NLP? Is it like whatever? And my response is always the same. Let's just go to the outcomes. You can tell that TRTP is different because it's achieving different outcomes. If it were very similar to any of those things, we'd be achieving the same outcomes. And so it stands to logical good reason to think, well, we must be doing something different. So yeah, we are doing something quite different. And as Kim said, we are able to ascertain what are the events in a person's life that have caused the distress. And it's never one event. You know, we have practitioners saying, well, how do you tell which event is the causative trigger? Well, no, it's not just one event. There may be a catastrophic event, but you can have two siblings, two twins go to war, and one will come back with PTSD and one won't. Why? Because one had more distressing events before going to war. So their balloon was more full of the distressing videotapes than the other. And so what TRTP does is we are able to quickly quickly, as Kim said, get to the root cause of why the person is feeling that I am not safe. If anyone here has ever experienced anxiety, you'll be familiar with that feeling, that underlying feeling, I'm not safe, something bad's about to happen. Richard, would you like to say anything more about that?
I was going to say that it's the application of the theory. So it brings the very best of psychodynamic theory, the very best of attachment theory, the very best of these theories that neuropsychotherapy. It brings the absolute essence of them to the experience of the client. And so many of the theories that I work with are very, very slow, whereas this is very, very fast. If you want to work with a client for 10 years, TRTP probably isn't your best option. If you want to see clients get well and never see them again, TRTP works really wonderfully. And T in sympathy is very much not what TRTP is. And in that regard, it does present a challenge. And the challenge is that the client is going to experience the energy of the practitioner. The practitioner has to do their own work, but it's not hard work. It's good work, wonderful work. But if you don't do it, you're not going to be much use to your client. It's not like you just sit behind a clipboard and analyze your client for an hour. It's not that work. It's strangely, they're doing much more of the work internally, but you're doing the work externally. It flips the whole thing around. And it's often, Judith often calls it ask about therapies. It's almost the inverse of cognitive behavioral therapy, because I change the truth of who I am, and therefore automatically my feelings and behaviors and thoughts change with it, because how I see myself, how I understand and experience myself has changed first. We don't even have to deal with the other things. If I do with CBT, I'm changing my thinking and my behaving, and then my life changes. Well, I've experienced that to be very, very slow process. This is not, this is fast.
And that requires, that CBT requires great motivation and discipline. Helen?
Yes, I agree. It sort of brings to the forefront, or sort of the good parts of many, many different therapies, and how it, to me, a big difference between TRTP and, say, ACT or CBT is that it's actually utilizing every part of the mind. So not just the 5 to 10% of the cognitive part of the mind, which is what CBT sort of works on, but the unconscious, the powerhouse of the mind, which is where everything's happening. So you can work for years and try and change, do cognitive restructuring, trying to get people to change their thinking. But if underneath the surface there are unconscious core beliefs that contrary to that, then it's just, that's why it takes so long and so ineffective. And other therapies tend to work to the symptoms. Like ACT would be, there's some great strategies, and that's great to sort of live life by, but it doesn't actually help someone to resolve or to take the emotional charge out of traumatic past events. Whereas this, cuts to the chase, takes the charge out of the past so that you can do some lovely work on your own, or with, sometimes people do like to do some extra work so that they can learn strategies moving forward to kind of enhance their life. But the main part of the work is done through TRTP.
Yeah, and the symptoms, whether it be panic attacks, anxiety, depression, extreme grief, the symptoms, OCD, etc., simply disappear when you turn off those videotape loops, because the client is returned to, it's over and I'm safe now. And Helen, you were talking about subconscious sabotage when you're just using the conscious mind. And so what that's about is, just in a nutshell, is that even before we're born, we're taking on ideas of who we are and how the world works, and if we're loved, and then we're born. For some people, that's a life-threatening experience. And then for those first 7 years, we're a little sponge taking on ideas, and that becomes the imprint. We are branded with these ideas, such things as, I don't matter for some of us. I'm not enough. I'll never be enough. Anyone who's supposed to love me will hurt me. It's not safe to be in the world, therefore it's not safe to be well. So if you're working with a client and they're 5% to 10% of their conscious mind what goes, yes, I want to be well, and the rest, the subconscious, which runs every chemical reaction, every electrical response in the body, if the unconscious is going, no, It's not safe for you to be well. You'll be out in the world and the world isn't safe, so I will keep you not well. Well, good luck with that one, because you're going to be pushing the proverbial uphill. So what we do in session 1 of TRTP is we get the subconscious and the conscious agreeing it's safe to be well, it's time to be well, and we change the subconscious core beliefs that lock in our patterns of behavior and the patterns of our life, you know, the patterns of abuse, the patterns of betrayal and abandonment, the patterns of illness and accident. So we change those, and in the second session, we turn off the videotape loops, and that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where we liberate the client. The client is liberated from the pain of the past. There is no distress, and therefore there is no longer triggering. Therefore, there is no longer rage. There is no longer anxiety. There is no longer depression. And, you know, some people just lose years. Some people lose the Parkinson's-like tremor of extreme PTSD and it doesn't come back. And the symptoms simply disappear. Libby, you've said, I'm curious about the ideas of turning off tapes. A number of my clients don't particularly have tapes that are consciously running. How's this worked with after the first session? Would anyone like to say that Libby's clients don't have tapes that are consciously running?
The tapes don't run consciously, they run unconsciously. People sabotage. They wonder, why do I keep getting into relationships with abusive people? Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep having this same thing happen over and over? It's almost as if their life is setting them up to fail, and they have no idea why, and they can't see it, they can't understand it or experience it. And because people aren't awake or aware of the unconscious core belief and the narrative that runs with it, because it runs unconsciously, they don't even know it's there.
Yeah, and we're not aware of these videotape loops, that time when I was 3 and when I was 7 and when I was 12 and when I was 15. And they're running all the time in the subconscious. And so we have to liberate our clients, ourselves first and our clients, from those by just turning them off. And then, hey, presto, we're no longer reacting. And our pain is gone.
And Judith,
yes, Kim.
sorry, and also for people, that's just become their way of life. That's just how they live.
Yeah, this is who I am. And we buy into that biggest lie. This is who I am. This is how I think. This is how I feel. That's just how it is. There's nothing I can do about it. This is the hand I was dealt. And it's such a lie. It is such a lie. Steph says, what practitioners might not be suitable for TRTP, for the training?
If you are not willing to take a more of a leadership role as a therapist, so often we're trained to not take up that space, and in TRTP you actually have to take command. It's a structured process, and it involves you stepping up and leading your client through that process.
Yes, it's not a collaborative process. And some practitioners, some therapists are not happy with that, and that's fine, but TRTP is not for them. It also requires the practitioner to be strong in who they are. So for some people who are lovely and gentle and meek, it wouldn't suit.
It's a very active.
Sometimes you can start off gentle and lovely and meek, and
yes, you can, Helen.
with the desire to be different, because that might be taking a long time to do it that way.
Yes.
So being open-minded to perhaps those new ways of developing your therapeutic style too.
Thank you, Helen, from personal experience. Yes. Sorry, Kim, what were you saying?
Well, really, to add to that, all the same, it's about being very actively involved in the process. Whereas with more traditional therapies, it might be engaging the client and there's a two-way going on, or you might be sitting back and waiting for the client to do the work. You are so actively involved, and in fact, if you're not actively involved, then nothing will happen.
Yeah, from the part of the practitioner.
From the part of the practitioner. And if you're not fully engaged, well, nothing will happen. And as Helen said, the client will pick up on that. And there's a risk of them falling back into to, either the depression or the anxiety. So it's very much holding the client in the process. So unless you're really prepared to change the way you work and be actively involved, being the leader, then that won't work for you.
Thank you, Kim. Very good point. Richard.
I'd want to say that the training will get practitioners to a place where they will know exactly how to practice, exactly how to get into that place of energy. They will go through the process themselves. So if you start tentative, reluctant, I've done so much CPD over the years, and normally you do days and days, sometimes weeks of training, and at the end of it, you're still not 100% sure how to practice it. You go, well, if only I could work out what the expert knows, but this, you'll come out, well, I came out of it, and I believe every student who engages in it comes out with a very clear sense of how to approach this, how to take that proactive approach with clients, how to get themselves in that empowered place before their client walks in the room. So from the get-go, the client experiences something very positive, affirming, and safe. And that's the other thing that I most like, that is so safe. I never take a client, none of us ever take a client to a place where they're re-traumatized. In fact, quite the opposite. From the very beginning, we do not ever let a client re-experience their trauma. There's one part where they're doing a bit of their homework, and we can even help them with that, talking about traumatic experiences. Even that can trigger them, but we can help them with that. So a client never needs to fear they're going to experience trauma in this process.
Can I add something to that?
Sure,
Yeah.
Helen.
So I think that was sort of going back in time. Why did I do TRTP? Because I knew enough to know that working with someone who had experienced trauma, one does not want to sort of go back into that story and talk over and over again. But I wasn't really quite sure what else to do. My toolkit was very limited, and this was a very enticing thing for me around TRTP, that it is absolutely so safe. And what happens now is, because so while I was cautious about people's story, but in general, just that was sort of a lot of what long-term therapy is about, listening, a lot of listening. And now when I'm working with people that I'm not doing TRTP with, that's probably one of the challenges now. It's like, oh no, I don't want to go there. So it has completely changed, I guess, the way I do therapy generally now, to be much more proactive, less about sort of listening. But for the better. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. So very active. What Helen and Richard just mentioned there was that the homework. What we do is we get the client, before they come to the sessions, to just make a list and just dot points of the top 10 to 12 most distressing events in their life. Not traumatic, but most distressing, and just the age, name of the event, and who was there. And we give them a template. There's not very much room to write because we don't want an essay. We don't want them to be re-traumatized. It's just the age you were, the name of the event, and who was there. And for a lot of clients who are self-aware, there's a huge aha moment there, because they can see that there's a pattern. It's the same thing. Bullying, abuse, bullying, abuse, or whatever it is. Betrayal. Oh my God, it's betrayal again, and different people, but the same pattern. And so what that does is instead of taking weeks to get a client history, it's just bang, before they even come, you've got a snapshot of that person's life and the patterns that have run it. And so from there, Helen.
As a practitioner, that in itself was pretty life-changing, because that homework alone was like, wow. Through that process, I'm just learning so much more about this client than that would have taken me a long time. And to see that pattern on paper, which, going back to what we were talking about before, those unconscious core beliefs create patterns, and people have abuse, or abandonment. Everyone has them, and it's very helpful for the clients to see that pattern, and that helps them to understand why TRTP works and what is happening. But that alone was pretty transformational as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing that we do, that some mental health professionals coming to webinars write me emails saying just your thing of just at the beginning of session 1, here's the T. Do you want to be not well or well? Make a decision. Who's responsible for you being well? And what's going to be the worst thing about it? And having the client take on the responsibility for their own wellness. A lot of people who don't come and do TRTP say just doing that is, I'm so less exhausted. I realized I was doing more work than the client. I was wanting the client to be well more than they were themselves. So there's a lot in TRTP that makes things very streamlined. So we don't muck about, we get straight into it. And there's some other questions here. Catherine Condon. Hello, Catherine. Catherine Condon. Does TRTP suit clients with brain impairment or inflexibility due to example Asperger's? Who'd like to answer that one? Richard.
Works with Asperger's just as well as somebody without Asperger's. I have done it with clients with acquired brain injuries, but you have to work slower. I would not work personally, though if you had expertise, you may be able to work with someone with distorted perceptions or schizophrenia, though I'd be very reluctant to work in that space. Intellectual impairment, I'd probably be reluctant to work in that space. But ASD does not present any problem at all.
Yep.
For TRTP.
Thank you, Richard. In fact, we have some practitioners like Mary Lynch who specialises in spectrum.
And we have practitioners on the spectrum.
And we have practitioners on the spectrum. Some of them a fair way along, who do marvellous work. A question from somebody. Does TRTP training include Mark Wallen's understanding of ancestral intergenerational trauma and how it is expressed in a new generation? Anybody, or shall I answer that one?
Well, yes, and you answer it, Jude. But yes, of course, it's addressed.
You know, the science of epigenetics is proven that trauma is passed down from generation to generation. And so, you know, if you look at the last century and the snowball of that distress and trauma and pain, well, here we are. And so TRTP does address generational trauma and resolves it. So just in a nutshell, there we are.
Whenever I read these questions, I keep going back to the fact that I feel like it's just cherry picked all the good bits of other therapies.
Say that again, Helen.
As I'm looking at sort of these questions around, does it include this type of therapy or that type of therapy? I felt somehow you Judith, have cherry picked the wonderful aspects of many therapies and combined them into a separate, unique therapy, which is TRTP. So inadvertently, yes. It does cover transgenerational trauma. It covers this, it covers that, because
that little bit is Gestalt, and that little bit is ego state therapy, and that little bit is, but it's what you do with it, as in the Castle, that
That's
movie.
right.
But it's and it brings bits from outside as well. So it's a step-by-step process. It's a structure that allows improvisation and allows tailoring to a particular client and their particular life journey. So it's very, very specific and very structured. It's a scaffolding, and the practitioner can absolutely tailor it to the person sitting in front of them who's in pain, and can absolutely take that person who's in pain by the hand, figuratively, and say, I know exactly what to do. All you need to do is follow my instructions, and I'll lead you to the other side of the pain. And that's what we do. There's something here. Do APS and APRA and the Psychiatry Board fully support TRTP? Yes, certainly, Helen.
So to me, that they support evidence-based therapies, of which, so once upon a time CBT wasn't evidence-based because it was new. TRTP is, relatively speaking, in its infancy compared to many others, it will become evidence-based. But so to me, what I think about that is that there are absolutely aspects of CBT, motivational interviewing, interpersonal therapy, relaxation, you know, anything that is part of the underpinnings of what would be considered to be acceptable from APRA or APS is within this treatment. It just happens to be sort of a packaged sort of version of it. So it's unique in itself. Once again, I sound a bit like I'm repeating myself, but it has aspects of all those.
Yes, it's got aspects
therapies.
of psychoeducation, of Gestalt, of whatever. Yeah. So it can be. And the other thing is that in terms of
restructuring.
Yes, and in terms of evidence-based, our small end point is to change how mental health is done. And to that end, we have practitioners, we have within our graduate community, academics, etc., who are taking our research projects and running with them. People like Dr. Jennifer Rice, who taught at one of the big Melbourne universities for 16 years on psychology research design. Patrina Barson, who's a GP who teaches at the medical department at Melbourne Uni. We are currently in talks with the medical department at Melbourne Uni about partnering with us in our research, and with Phoenix Australia, which is one of the biggest PTSD research organisations in Australia. We have Rosemary Boone in Sydney, who takes EEGs before and after, showing the difference in brain function after TRTP. Rosemary is a leader in the field of neurofeedback and can tell by an EEG whether someone has PTSD or not, because of course there is changes in brain function with trauma. There are changes in brain structure with trauma. And if you, we've done some webinars with Rosemary, so they're available on the YouTube channel as well, if you're interested in that department. Joseph, on your iPhone, if as a therapist you have personal trauma in your life, how do you undertake the journey of dealing with your own trauma and then becoming a TRTP practitioner? Joe, isn't that why most of us come into this field? So Joe, what happens is in the training, even before you begin the training, you're assigned a mentor, someone who will hold your hand during the 8 weeks. It's an 8-week program. And you do session 1 and session 2 of TRTP, working on your own stuff, your own history, before you even start the training. And it's only in doing that, Joe, that you understand the power and possibilities of TRTP. There's nothing like experiential learning, is there? So every student does TRTP just before they begin the training. And then for the first 3 weeks of the training, you learn all about session 1, and you do that do it at your own pace, online learning. So watch 3 videos, do a quiz, that sort of thing. And then there's a 3-day workshop, and that's all online now since COVID, so you don't have to travel anywhere. And then after the 3-day workshop, you begin working with your own clients, with your mentor advising you. There's a 1.5 hour call with your mentors each week, with your mentor each week, and the other few students that the mentor is mentoring. So you bring your own case studies, your own client stories to that call, and you're advised by your mentor, and you look over the shoulder at the other students working with their clients. So you get a very well-rounded understanding. There's also, after the 3-day workshop, 2 hours with me every week in a virtual classroom, which is a live online classroom where we do more learning. At the end of the 8 weeks, you don't just have information and knowledge, you've got experience, you've got runs on the board, and you know what you're doing. Not everyone does what Helen Mersel did, which was jump straight in and in her first week see 15 clients, as well as her normal caseload. So not everyone does that. She is an extreme athlete. But
the right memo.
No, but it's about jumping in and using TRTP, and your hand is held by your mentor. And at the end of the 8 weeks, but wait, there's more. We don't just say, bye, see you later. No, that's where the real learning begins, where you become a member of our TRTP practitioner community. And so there is so much support. There's a 1-hour video conference call each week, which is continual professional development. There's an online forum where you can put up a tricky case and be advised by others. I mean, Helen, you put up one recently, even Helen, who's in our teaching team. And the support, we have a particular culture in our community, and that's generosity, kindness, and egos left at the door. It's a very safe place. And for those who don't fit our culture, we actually show them the door. So we guard our culture. Richard, would you like to say something about the community?
I was reflecting on this last Friday in our call, how so often professional communities are very guarded because we only talk about our successes. We never talk about our struggles, and we keep all of our intellectual property to ourselves because we don't want anyone else to get in on this. And this is the most generous, inclusive, caring, loving, supportive community that you'll come across professionally. At least in my experience, it is very equal. There are no prima donnas. There's no intellectual elitism. It's very collaborative, very supportive, and pretty much free. And it's there all the time. And it's wonderful to be part of that. To know
Yes.
that I can share anything, wins and losses, struggles, and anything that I'm going through, and know that you'll only ever get support from it.
Yeah, Helen.
To that question as well, ongoing, just being one of the great things about being a TRT practitioner is that when you're taking your client through, you're also going through the process in some ways yourself. And so, and you can use, it's not really just this process that you do and then that's it. We teach our clients actually to use aspects of TRTP in their daily life. So if they've had a stressful conversation with their boss at work, they can use sort of aspects of the TRTP process to be able to take the charge out of that experience so that the balloon of life doesn't get big again. You can just take the charge out as you go. So that's one of the big upsides of being a TRT practitioner, is that you're just forever doing your own work alongside the clients. And just to second everything, the community is amazing and the training is amazing. In other training that I've done,
was it valuable? Was it worth it?
Yes, it's absolutely worth it. And in other training that you do, well, I've gone away and I thought, well, that's a great technique, and I've gone to use it and I thought, oh shit, what do I do now? Oh, not sure, I'll go back to my old ways. Whereas with TRTP training, there's just so much support ongoing. 4 years on, I haven't barely missed one of the Friday sessions because there's just so supportive, and it's just a wonderful community. So there's just that ongoing, yes, and it is value for money.
How has your practice changed, Helen?
Well, so while I don't, as a psychologist, I don't endorse a particular practice of treatment, but I will say that my books are filled till now. Or April is a new month that are bookings, and that's definitely seems to have happened since a certain training that I did
in TRTP. So you're booked out till April, are you saying?
Absolutely, yes. That's my biggest challenge in stress, is trying to fit people in.
Everybody in who wants TRTP. What
Yeah.
about
and
you?
Then, and then people that are coming for short-term work. So it's not like it's all full because of
long
lots
term.
of long-term clients.
Yeah. How about you, Kim? How's your practice changed?
Well, similar. I was one of the reasons for doing TRTP is I'm sort of more at the tail end of my career, and having worked in medium long-term psychotherapy, I was wanting something more dynamic, and I was seeing more and more trauma-related clients, and I wanted something more, and feeling a bit tired. And then I did TRTP, and now I'm working more than I've ever worked, and I've got a busier practice than I've ever had, and I'm not looking at in the next couple of years of retiring, which I was planning on doing at the end of this year, and I'm just too busy, and importantly, I'm feeling so revitalized.
That's the key, isn't it?
It's just such rewarding work. There is nothing like the end of the first session to see a client at the end going, some say it's a spiritual experience. I had one woman recently say that felt like a deeply spiritual experience. I'm tingling all over, or I feel so free, I feel liberated. There's no other training I have ever done where at the end of the first 2 or 3 sessions, there's been clients who have just transformed before your eyes. So
Yeah.
that's transformed me, and my practice that I'm so busy likewise booked out. And I just love it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kim. And I would ask you, Richard, but we've run out of time. And I know that Richard sent me an email just recently saying it's all your fault. And I thought, what have I done? I said, what have I done? He said, I've never been so busy. I've never had miraculous results like this, and I've never made so much money, which of course allows generosity. But we're 1 minute to the hour, so we'll wrap it up in just a moment. There are a number of people have been asking in here and in earlier. I'm sorry we haven't answered all the questions. Boy, hasn't the time flown. It's just zoomed by, so I'm terribly sorry. If you have questions, if you're interested in having a conversation, Jane, lovely to have you here. If you're interested in finding out more about TRTP, more about the training, just type in interested. After this, you'll find that you'll have received a text and an email with a link to make an appointment to have a conversation with us. So do make that appointment time so that we're not playing phone tag. We're all very busy and it's such a pain doing phone tag. So there's an email to make a Q&A. Appointment's a 20-minute conversation with us. We have to do something different from what we're doing, people. There is a tsunami of pain out there. A tsunami of pain that has been ratcheted up and up with COVID. Have you noticed? It's not good. And we have to do something different from what we've been doing, or we'll continue to get the same results. TRTP is different. We are hell-bent on, we will change how mental health is done. So come and join us and have the people who sit in front of you get well quickly, effectively, and does it last? Yes, I've followed some people for 8 years. So great to have you here. Thank you for investing your time. Thank you for being here. And if you have further questions, and if we haven't got to your question, go and make that appointment. There's a link you can just click on, make a time that'll work for you, and we'll get back to you. And thank you, Dr. Helen Mersell. Thank you, Kim Hobson. Love your work, guys. Richard Fay, thank you so much. It's been a delight to talk with you. And gosh, it's gone so quickly. So go gently, everyone. And let's talk soon. Come and join us.
Bye.
Helen, Richard, and Kim are just typical about the extraordinary people who are in our TRTP practitioner community. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Night.
Donna Marie is saying, where's that link, please? I missed that bit. You'll have received a text and an email, Donna Marie, into your email box, and it will have a link, a blue link. Just click on it and it will take you to a calendar where you can make an appointment just for a 20-minute conversation with someone here in our office who'll endeavour to answer all your questions. So thanks very much. And Tanya's just put it up here. richardstraumaprocess.com/book an appointment with hyphens. Thank you, Tanya, who's in our office as we speak. Thanks and good night.